My name is Leela Hart, and I used to believe in patience. I used to believe that if you worked hard, stayed quiet, met your deadlines, and didn't stir things up, eventually someone would notice and reward you. That's what I told myself when month one passed and the paycheck didn't come. When the HR auto-reply said we're working on internal processing delays. When my boss looked at me and said, "It's not just you, Leela. Everyone's feeling it. Just hang tight." So I did. I stayed late. I covered for teammates who quit. I updated the product sheets for the upcoming launch, a launch they swore would change the company's future. And all the while, I was using my savings to eat, juggling overdue rent, and acting like everything was fine on Zoom calls where I smiled through a cracked camera lens and said, "Yeah, I'm good, just tired." But what tired really meant was hungry. What tired meant was 4 months of waking up knowing I was still showing up for a job that didn't even think I was worth a direct email. They owed me 4 paychecks, 4, and do you know what that does to someone? It's not just about the money, it's about what the silence does. Every week they don't pay you is another week they prove you don't matter. And still, I kept working, because I was on the core launch team. Because the product was mine too. I had built half the workflow design myself, the roadmap, the customer presentation, the UI walkthrough that the CEO demoed at the last investor meeting, that was mine. My code, my ideas, my voice ghosted behind his, but by the end of the 4th month, even patience started to rot, not with rage, not with drama, just with the kind of stillness that becomes dangerous. I remember the exact moment something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud, it was Thursday, 3:07 p.m. I had sent yet another reminder to payroll and Cecitachar. It was the 6th email in 30 days. I used polite language. I always did, just following up. Hope this finds you well. Please advise on timeline. I even added a thank you. No one replied. I refreshed 3 times, nothing. Then I looked at the calendar. It was exactly 2 weeks until launch day. The day we'd been killing ourselves for. The day investors were flying in. The day they kept saying would solidify our name in the space. And that's when the thought landed. I had nothing to lose. They had taken the pay. Taken the credit, taken my voice, but I still had access. I still had the backend folders, still had the Slack logs, still had my admin clearance, not because I was trusted, but because they never bothered to downgrade my role after 2 project leads quit, and I quietly picked up their tasks. They didn't notice I was holding the system together, because people like me, women like me, we don't explode. We endure until we don't, so I didn't scream, I didn't rant, I just opened a folder. It was an internal backup. Old, archived. I only clicked it because I thought maybe, just maybe, there was some documentation trail I could use if this ever became legal. But inside that folder, I found something else. A folder marked exec com do not sync. That wasn't standard. We had naming conventions. This didn't match anything. When I opened it, it wasn't code. It wasn't a product roadmap. It was emails, private ones, between the CEO and the board, between legal and leadership, between the people who smiled in webinars and the ones who hadn't responded to me in months. And in those emails, they weren't scrambling to fix the payroll system. They were laughing about it, calling unpaid staff risk tolerant, saying things like, "Most of them will keep working. They need us more than we need them." That's when the temperature in my hands changed. I remember just staring, reading, scrolling, one after the other. Emails about delaying contractor payments to make the balance sheet look better for the round. Emails mocking customer complaints. Emails with screenshots of struggling employees, mine, included as if our silence was a strategy. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a delay. It was intentional, and I had proof. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I wasn't thinking revenge, but I did close the folder and whisper something to myself, not loud, not angry. Just calm. They think I'm still hungry enough to stay quiet. And that's when I realized they weren't just stealing from me. They were betting on my silence. I wasn't looking to burn anything down. Not yet. After I saw those emails in the do not sync a folder, I just logged out. I remember closing the laptop like it was hot to the touch. My chest felt hollow. My hands were steady, but my breath That shallow, stunned kind of breathing wouldn't stop. For hours I sat there, staring at the same unpaid invoice on my fridge like it was mocking me. What do you do when you realize you were never forgotten, just strategically ignored? That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe those emails weren't recent. Maybe it was old internal sarcasm. Maybe I was being too sensitive. That's how it works, right? They train you to doubt your own anger. They wrap abuse in strategy and call it business, but the timestamp said otherwise. Most of the threads were less than 6 days old, and one of them, it was from that morning. The subject line caught me first. Launch confidence and asset control. It was a reply chain between the CEO, his chief of staff, and someone from the board. Most of it was jargon financial terms, projections, short-term cash models. But buried halfway down, one sentence stopped me. It was from the CEO himself, and it read, "If we lose Leela, the prototype lags. She won't walk, though she's 4 months behind rent and too emotionally attached to what she built. Fear keeps her productive." I read it twice. Then a third time, and then I just sat there. That was the moment, right there, not the missing money, not the silence, that sentence, that was the breaking point, because now it wasn't just a payroll delay or mismanagement. It was targeted, intentional. They had looked at my life, my silence, my loyalty, and labeled it leverage. My poverty was their project management strategy. I had never felt rage that quiet before. It wasn't explosive. It was surgical, because when someone puts in writing that your desperation is an asset, that they're counting on your exhaustion to keep you compliant, something in your spine realigns. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. I wasn't scared of them anymore, not of the CEO, not of legal, not of HR, because fear can't survive where clarity lives. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even speak the rest of that day. I just went for a walk, no music, no calls, just me, processing the fact that the people I worked for didn't just underpay me, they weaponized my silence. And now I had proof, hard proof. I opened the folder again when I got home. Read every message twice. I printed some of them. Others I screened, captured and saved to a drive not connected to anything I owned. I wasn't thinking revenge, not in the emotional sense. I was thinking exposure. Structure, sequence. They had crossed a line, and they didn't even realize it. That's what power does when it's unchecked. It forgets it's being watched. The irony, they never even intended to leave that folder accessible. It was probably meant to be locked, moved offline, but they had gotten lazy. I had built half the document routing system they used. I knew which links synced where. I knew the naming structures. They didn't change the default pathway because they never assumed anyone like me would notice. They thought I was just another asset, but I remembered every folder I created. They didn't fire me because they feared my failure. They didn't fire me because I made a mistake. They didn't fire me at all because they thought they still owned me, because they knew I was broke, behind, and too proud to speak out. They bet on my silence. They wrote emails laughing about it. They used my name like I wasn't a person. And now they were 2 weeks from launch, with millions in PR, investor hype, and promotional contracts riding on their perfect rollout. And sitting on my hard drive were messages that could break everything. They used fear to keep me working, so I decided to teach them what fear really felt like, not by yelling, not by fighting, by delivering their own words neatly formatted, clearly time-stamped into the hands of the one audience they could never control. Their partners, because I wasn't going to leak a rumor. I was going to send the truth to the people who mattered most to them, right before the moment they needed control the most, launch day. They thought if they underpaid me long enough, I'd disappear. They thought my silence was loyalty. They never imagined it was leverage. That weekend, I didn't post anything, didn't tell my friends, didn't even text the 3 coworkers who'd quietly DM'd me, "Hey, are you okay?" after I stopped appearing on team syncs. I wasn't okay, but I was clear. This wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about destroying anyone. It was about exposure, controlled, verified, undeniable. I had something more dangerous than rage. I had receipts. And I knew who they were trying to impress, not me, not customers, not even employees. It was the partners, the people they were trying to dazzle on launch day, high-value investors, white-label software clients, government pilot programs. The board had been banking everything on that launch. They delayed it 3 times. This was their big bet, and I knew exactly when and where the partnership announcement emails were scheduled to go out. Because I was the one who wrote them. That was the irony. I'd built the entire outreach system from scratch during my 2nd month back when I was still being paid. The database routing logic, the vendor flags, the compliance checkboxes, mine. My fingerprints were on every piece of that infrastructure, and now I was going to use it, but not the way they would. No drama, no headlines, just direct communication. Straight to the inboxes of the people who mattered most to them. That Monday, I spent 6 hours curating the email list. I pulled every partner contact I'd ever seen in a CC line. I cross-checked LinkedIn for current roles. I organized by division, relevance, and launch involvement. I wanted it clean, undeniable, professional. Then I spent another day assembling the evidence, screenshots, PDFs, email threads, forward headers with timestamps. Not just the one message where the CEO called me emotionally attached and desperate, but 10 others. Messages about delaying payments to contractors to inflate liquidity. Internal jokes about faking beta results. One email even hinted at misreporting usage data to early-stage partners. I didn't need to write anything dramatic. I just attached the files. Then I wrote exactly 5 sentences. To whom it may concern, attached our internal communications regarding financial misconduct and intentional suppression of contractor payments tied to your upcoming partnership launch. These materials are unaltered and traceable. This information was withheld from multiple contributors. You deserve to know who you're in business with. I signed it, anonymous, former internal contributor, no hashtags, no threats, no social post to chase it, just a file sent privately. Cleanly to 3 inboxes. I hit send exactly 48 hours before launch day. Then I turned off my phone, not to hide, but to disconnect. Because the thing about telling the truth like that, the kind they can't spin, can't edit, can't silence, is that it doesn't need volume. It just needs to land in the right hands, and I knew it had. By Tuesday morning, 2 partners quietly backed out of their public announcement. No reason, just adjustments to internal timelines. That's how it starts polite exits. But that's when I knew they'd opened the files. That afternoon, the company held an emergency alignment call. For all launch teams, I wasn't on it. But someone forwarded me the call notes, not out of loyalty, but because they knew I'd want to see one word at the bottom: communication freeze until further review. They had gone silent, and silence, for companies like that, is blood in the water. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even smiling. I was just sitting at my tiny kitchen table, watching a company try to hold its future together with duct tape while the truth they buried kept spreading. Because I hadn't leaked anything. I didn't scream. I didn't hack. I didn't threaten. I just delivered their words to the people they needed the most at the exact moment they couldn't afford to be seen clearly. And now they were exposed. The launch clock was still ticking, but their reputation was already out of time. Launch day was supposed to be loud, confetti, screens, polished executives clapping in 2 tight suits, reading from scripts they barely rehearsed. The CEO was booked on 2 podcasts and 1 local business segment. I'd helped prep those talking points: transformative tech, ethical scaling, employee-first culture. That last one was hard to type without laughing, but I typed it anyway back then. Because even betrayal wears a smile in the beginning. But now, there was no laughter. There was no launch. Just a company trying to remember how to breathe while its partners quietly walked out the back door. I didn't do anything that day. I didn't send more emails. I didn't write a thread. I didn't call the press. I just opened my laptop, checked the time, and watched. By 8:42 a.m., the launch page was down. By 9:00, it redirected to a maintenance screen. By 10:15, 2 mid, tier tech blogs had posted the same cryptic headline: rumors of a leaked email thread shake startup's big day. The article didn't say my name. Didn't mention specifics, but it didn't have to, because every partner who received that email already knew. I'd done the math the night before. Each one of those relationships was worth 6 figures minimum. Many were investors. Some were early clients promised priority integration and founder access. Now they were sending legal requests, audit inquiries, holding contracts in limbo, and they were doing it publicly. That's what made it beautiful, not the chaos, but the silence that followed it. No one from the company posted anything for 12 hours, no tweets, no LinkedIn shoutouts, no email blast saying we're live, just nothing, which in tech might as well be a funeral, because launches live and die on momentum, and if the first 12 hours are quiet, you're dead. But it wasn't just the partners pulling out. It was the internal unraveling. I got a message that afternoon from a former dev team lead. We hadn't talked since she quit in February burnout, she said. Overworked, undervalued. She sent me one line. Whatever you did, it was overdue. They're turning on each other now. She wasn't being dramatic. By noon, the CEO calendar went private. The leadership page on the company website changed. The Meet Our Team section shrunk by 2 names. Then came the tweets not from the company, but from people watching. One investor wrote, "Due diligence matters. Always verify leadership integrity, especially when the product looks too polished." Another, quieter but sharper, posted, "Transparency isn't just a buzzword. Founders who exploit their teams don't get to hide behind NDA forever." Still, I didn't respond, didn't repost, didn't say a word, because the best part of exposing someone isn't watching them fall. It's knowing you didn't have to push. They did that on their own with every lie they emailed, every unpaid hour they called team spirit. Every private joke about desperate workers holding the product together for free. They built their launch on silence. They buried people like me under it, but silence doesn't stay buried, not when someone keeps records. Not when someone knows exactly where the folder is. By 6:00 p.m., the company released a statement. It wasn't an apology, of course not. It was full of language like unexpected challenges and partner realignments. They said they'd reschedule the launch to better reflect our values. I almost laughed, because the only thing they were reflecting now was panic. I imagined the war room. They were probably in laptops open, lawyers dialing in, HR scrambling to explain who still had access, which folders had been touched, how a low-level staffer could ever see executive messages. They were probably blaming each other by then, and I knew that none of them had paused to ask, why didn't we just pay her? Because to them, I was never a person, just a resource, just a cost center, just a risk, and now I was the reason they lost partners, the reason they lost face, the reason the launch never made it out of staging. But I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even angry anymore. Because anger means you're still waiting for something: justice, closure, an apology. I wasn't. All I ever wanted was for someone, anyone, to see what they were doing. Now 60, 3 people had seen it. And not one of them responded with denial, not one. They just quietly stepped back, cut ties, and left the company to drown in its own cover story. That night, I ate dinner in silence. No champagne, no revenge playlist. Just peace, because I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted to be done, and I was. There was no grand finale, no viral tweet, no news segment, no whistleblower article with my photo blurred out and the headline screaming, "Startup implodes after internal leak." And honestly, that was perfect, because I didn't do this for noise. I did it for silence. Not the silence they gave me when I asked for my paycheck. Not the kind that leaves you staring at your phone, hoping for a reply that never comes. I mean the kind of silence that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to fix it, when you stop asking for permission to be treated like a human being. The day after the failed launch, I got a single email. Not from the company, from a junior partner I'd worked with once, maybe twice. Just 3 lines: "You didn't deserve that. If you ever build something on your own, let us know. We'd rather back people who don't lie." I never replied. Because the point was never to use this as leverage. It wasn't a move in a bigger plan. It was the plan. Expose the truth. Let them deal with the consequences. Walk away clean. I never got my salary. Never got severance. They never even updated my exit status in the internal system. But you know what I did get: peace, because I didn't just survive it. I controlled the ending. I chose what they would remember. Not my absence, not my silence, not the debt they left me with, but the file, the truth, the precise moment when the girl they thought they broke quietly, gently, strategically stopped being afraid of them. They still don't know it was me. I imagine there were meetings, investigations, whispered phone calls, legal fire drills trying to trace where the leak came from. They probably blamed a vendor, maybe a disgruntled intern. Maybe each other, but they never said my name because I had scrubbed it from the files. I had formatted everything cleanly, professionally. No emotional fingerprints, no obvious vendetta, just documentation. Just data, exactly the kind they used to praise me for collecting. And that was the best part. They trained me to track details, to sync records, to document inconsistencies, and I did, just not for them. For me, now, I'm working contract jobs, freelancing, building slowly, no company logos on my LinkedIn, no about me, sections screaming for recognition, just quiet work, good clients, respectful conversations. And more than anything control, they thought control meant power, means, money, status, the ability to cut someone off without consequence. But control is something quieter. It's knowing that when they finally reached their big moment, they looked around for applause and heard nothing because of you. It's knowing that you didn't have to scream to be heard. You didn't have to rage to win. You just had to remember who you were before they rewrote your name into a liability. I think a lot about that moment when I first read the email that broke me open, the one that said I was emotionally attached and desperate. It was supposed to reduce me. Instead, it clarified me. Because what they called weakness was actually proof that I cared, that I saw what they didn't, that I stayed when most would have walked. And when I finally did walk, it wasn't because I broke. It was because I'd finished. That's what they never understood. I was never stuck. I was just collecting the truth, and when I had enough, I gave it away cleanly, quietly, without a name, just a file, just the facts. Just a reminder that even the smallest voice, when it speaks with evidence, can end a lie 10 times louder than it ever began. They never paid me, but in the end, they were the ones who couldn't afford the cost.